like yourself can ask freely and learn from the unmatched experiences of eminent speakers. So today I'm deeply honored and thrilled to welcome our guest, Mr. Ramraj, who has been one of the most active and genial pillars of support for incubation cells startup ecosystem right from the beginning. And I must say, I have personally learned a lot from him and very grateful for all the time that he spent with us and our startups. So his profile and accomplishments are stellar, and just wanted to give a quick glimpse. Dr. Ramraj is a serial entrepreneur who has been involved in ventures in IT, cellular, and internet industries. He had co-founded Microland, which was India's first networking company. He was also the co-founder and CEO of Sifi, which under his leadership became the first Indian internet company to list on NASDAQ. He later served as a senior advisor at Sequoia Capital and is currently in a similar position at Elever Equity. He's the chairman of Wilgrow Foundation, director of IIM Calcutta Innovation Park, and of course the board member of IITM Incubation Cell and many other hats that he wears being part of our larger ecosystem. In 2010, the Confederation of Indian Industry recognized him with a Lifetime Achievement Award for nurturing the spirit of entrepreneurship and inspiring and mentoring numerous entrepreneurs. And the list goes on. And so with these few words, it gives me great pleasure to welcome Mr. Ramraj once again. And I request him to share a few words with us. Of course, after this, we're going to open up the session for an extensive and hopefully a lively Q&A. So I would request everyone to reserve your questions for that session. Requesting Mr. Ramraj to say a few words.
Thank you, Tama. It's nice to be back here again. Couldn't say no to Muthu. So what is the difference between scaling and growth? And the difference is the revenue-wise, both are very similar. Like to grow the top line, whether you're growing or whether you're scaling. The difference is that in growth, often the costs continue to grow at similar proportion to the revenue. And whereas in scaling, the costs don't grow, but kind of remain flatter relative to the growth of revenue. So scaling is leveraging existing cost and infrastructure to scale the business. And that means disproportionate ability to grow revenue on what you have invested in already. And that is the difference that we need to keep, because otherwise what happens is we grow the revenue and then it is linear. Add 1 rupee, we add 1 person, almost like that. That is not something that investors look forward to. Scale is what investors look forward to. And as entrepreneurs, we would all enjoy doing it. What holds some of us back when we do? First of all is we need to think big, aspire big. I'll give you a simple example. In 1997, the only internet company providing was a government company. That's all. In 98, the government said, we'll give licenses to anybody. There were 600 licenses that were taken. Only 12 were national. There was really no great difference in the cost of application. It was mindset. And of the 600, only 1 raised money on NASDAQ and went on to have a market cap of $11.5 billion. Today we talk about unicorns that cross $1 billion. In 99, 2000, Sifi had a market cap of $11.5 billion. Not a single other ISP has listed on NASDAQ from India till today. And why? First is an aspiration to make a difference, to think big, and to seize opportunities. Second, and I think the biggest challenge, is fear of failure. Many of us hesitate to do something because of that fear of failure. For an entrepreneur, that is not something that is great to have. I'm not saying we should not be worried, that we should not assess risk. All of that is prudent business. But fear of failure is something that holds us all back. And that is not going to help in scaling. So aspire big. Don't be scared of failure. Instead, go try, quickly be agile, adapt, and try again. Third is, often we try to do things ourselves. Small teams, frugal is good. Small teams, when we want to scale, cooperation, large teams, or not large, but fantastic teams, is necessary to scale. How do we attract talent? And what is it that brings people to work with you is your passion. No HR recruiter can sell your company for talent to join you the way you would. So talent is something you need, and look at it from the beginning. Who would I like to have on my team? And you again think big. I have seen companies go and bring the CTO out of India's largest tech companies to a startup because they tell them that you can make a huge difference here, and share the passion and get them to believe in that passion. So again, even when you look for talent, think big. Stocks you can use rather than cash in multiple ways. We can talk about it when you ask me questions. So I would say, aspire big, think big, don't be scared of failure, and have a great team. And with that, I think we can start seeing far more unicorns coming out of India than we currently have. Namaspati, back to you for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Amraj. So I think we'll open up for questions from the people who are here today. Anybody that can go first, you can just switch on your mic and your video and go first, and the rest can probably raise your hand and I'll come back to you. Any questions from anyone?
Hi, this is Rani Muralidharan from
Rani.
Independent Connections Private Limited. So we are a 1.5-year-old startup, and we are into service, where we work with women who have taken a career break. We work with them and we make them employment ready, and we see how they can get back to work. So we found that there is huge potential for scaling in this in our model of business. So you just said that you must take risk and you must take that plunge. So now we have established the system. We have members. Every day we have a few members signing up, and then so this process is going on. But we are not able to take that call as to when we should take the plunge of scaling up. So when we say scaling up, we can only scale up by taking technology as a tool to scale up, right? So what is that point when we should think that, yes, I am now ready to scale up?
Yesterday. It is, I don't think you should wait. See,
Okay.
First is you have tested whether there is an opportunity, whether the
Yes.
model that you have works.
Yes.
Once you have that, and if you have the aspiration, that
Yes.
you are actually making a difference to all these great talent of women who had to take a break and now want to come back,
Yeah.
then that is a very large part of our trained talent.
Correct.
The sooner we get them into mainstream working, the greater it is for the country itself.
Absolutely.
So there is a purpose beyond making money. Nothing wrong with having a purpose to make money, but you
Absolutely.
actually have a purpose of bringing women back into the workforce
Yes.
meaningfully and
Yes.
creating a difference in the economy. So something that is
Absolutely.
good for the country. It's an inspirational purpose and an ideal to which many people can come. Now, if you have the aspiration that, hey, what I'm doing, I want to do far more, I want to scale, and that is within you, then you should start looking at every opportunity to do this. Many a time, what holds us back when technology comes is that we don't have access to the right technology talent. Then what do we do? Because it's expensive to test out, try out.
Yeah.
I think there are people who are now available who are like my CFO, there is my CTO kind of profiles. I think the other way is better. There's no need to see my face. I'd rather see all your faces. I think we can remove this IIT Madras and see
Yeah,
people. I think this is better. I can see. So I think you have to be clever in finding those people who can help. I know a startup who's had somebody and now work from home. You have talent who can be anywhere in the world and help you with technology. These same women or friends of yours, batchmates of yours, old colleagues of yours are in tech positions somewhere in the world. They could not work for you because they're not in Chennai in the past. Today, everybody knows how to work remotely. How do you leverage that? And get talent to work on your technology sooner than later. Find innovative ways to access this tech talent. And if it is the starting point to build a big business is that you want to do it, only then do you take that step forward. There are some people who are happy with what they have. They want to go play golf in the afternoon, maybe. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. After all, we are doing all this to find that happiness. But if that comes with making a difference to the workforce in India, and that's what is motivating you, then you should not hesitate. Innovate in finding tech talent.
I think you really gave me a perspective that I did not think about. Like, getting a talent, bringing a talent in-house and, making that difference. That really sounds interesting. And I think we did not look at it from that angle. Thank you for that, sir. Thank you so much.
Welcome.
Thank you, Rani.
Thank you.
I don't see any more raise of hands right now. I think people are still thinking about questions. I wanted to, maybe I'll go ahead. We had, in fact, collected a few questions at the time of registration, Mr. Ramraj, from some of our startups. I hope some of them are here today, or I'm not sure. I'll just go ahead and ask you, Mr. Ramraj. So this comes from one of our manufacturing startups who are already in the market, but at the very early stage, of course. So his question was developing own capabilities versus outsourcing fabrication. they wanted your perspective on that.
If coming out of an IIT incubator, one of the things that IIT or academic institutions help is create differentiated IP. Then for you to make a big difference as the person who has the IP, the clever way is to find ways to have this manufactured across the globe through licensing or whatever else. Some core prototyping, understanding, and working closely with the unit closer to you to understand what changes need to be made on the ground is helpful. But otherwise, I would think if this IP is really making a difference, I would encourage licensing it to as many people around the globe and have that product hit the road sooner than later. So that is what I would think. See, where we want to keep manufacturing is that the entire IP is in the manner in which you make it. And there is a lot of learning to do in that manufacturing. Different types of things coming together. Then you may want to have one test unit with you and then do the rest later. But otherwise, I don't see, there used to be, and I think there still is, a company called Lung Fu, I think. About 10, 15 years ago, they were the largest exporters of garments out of Hong Kong. Their strength was design. They would design the most fashionable garments and they would help get orders. They did not make a single garment themselves. If somebody was really good at getting a zip done somewhere, it would go there. Buttoning would go somewhere else. Embroidery would go somewhere else. Just cutting the fabric into the right shapes would go somewhere else. They had zero manufacturing facilities. They were the largest exporters of garments in the world at one time. So there are multiple ways in which you achieve scale. Not necessary that you have to do everything yourself. What is core, what is proprietary, that you try to keep close to heart and try and do it yourself. But otherwise, try and license, try and leverage. Today, especially when there are specialists all over the world that you can access, you should exploit that and not try and do too many things yourself, is how I would look at it.
Well said. Not do too many things yourself, yes. And especially we experienced that, Mr. Ramaraj, at IIT, where people would want to keep everything to heart because these are hardcore technologists. So letting go is always a tough call for many. They think of it that way, that we are letting go of something.
Yeah. So they say that it is better to give than to take. So I think, see, one of the things is many of us who think technology, it's a differentiator, no doubt about that. But often we miss out the go-to-market aspect.
Yeah.
The logistics. If you manufacture close to where your customers are, you would create an incredible cost difference, speed of delivery, cost of distribution, so many things. So I would think go-to-market is one weakness that many of us have who focus a lot on technology and product and not think of the customer and the access to the customer.
So another question follow on to that I had earlier was growing in India versus growing globally. How do you optimize that?
See, the thing is, if you are a tech company, your customers can be anywhere. And especially today, if you can service them from sitting in Chennai or wherever, it doesn't matter. The question is, we have an attitude of chalta hai to an extent. I said I will do it. Yeah, but it's not happening. I said I'll give it to you by 10 this morning. Yeah, so it's 11. So what happened? Doesn't matter. And in India, we may even forgive. Thank God, at least it came by 11.
Yeah.
You won't be forgiven anywhere else.
Absolutely.
And there is, once you set expectations, you have to exceed it, not give excuses. For whatever reason, we give a number of excuses, which is why often we say, try in India, gain some experience before you go global. That the quality of your after service, the quality of your responsiveness, that you have something up on the website that says something. You say, do it yourself. And then you can't do it yourself. Some things that, small things. For us, it's very small. But for the customer who's used to 100% kind of service or quality or reassurance, you will get a very negative reaction. So unless you're really used to handling global customers and and you have that attitude of doing whatever you have committed, I would suggest local then global. But for a tech company, there is no reason not to go global from day one. As long as you have that attitude of being customer-centric, customer-focused, honoring every commitment that you make. Therefore, be careful in making the commitments. But whatever you make, honor it. But be careful. If you have some challenge, I'd say 95%, not 100. But once you set an expectation, then you have to exceed it. And that is sometimes the challenge when we go global, that, hey, I did it, I delivered it. You haven't even informed the customer you're going to be half an hour late. If we are 10 minutes late to a meeting or 5 minutes late to a meeting, we think it's still in the range.
Yeah.
That is not acceptable in most parts of the world. Their trains run to the clock. It's not a minute late.
Yes.
So if we don't have that exposure, then we are disappointed, we are frustrated, and the customers are angry. But otherwise, there is no reason to not go global if you can service from here.
Thank you. I think I've seen a few messages here from a couple of participants. I think Remcos Technologies is the founder here. If you want to ask your question, or shall I just go ahead? I'm not sure if Remcos is here right now. His question was, what are the strategies required to scale up instead of growth for healthcare startups, as successful scaling is part of planning, effort, and good luck? And that's what yeah.
Good luck comes with good planning and good execution, good preparation. It's great if there is something beyond all that, then that's bonus. But that's not in our control. So we focus on what's in our control.
Yeah.
In our control is planning, preparation, and then execution. So I would think in healthcare especially, there is, I think, a lot of regulation, governance, compliance, things like that. Are we as transparent? What is the challenge between Covishield and Covaxin? Is I think there is a data transparency between the two. I don't know much that there is that much of a gap on efficacy, but there was a little bit of a question mark on data transparency. Straight away, as consumers, we were hesitant. I'm not so sure that there was a reason for it other than opacity of data, of information to us. So in healthcare, therefore, all of this becomes important in our preparation, that we have good governance, good compliance, and any reversal there is far more damaging than in a tech company or in any other company. Food and health, I would think, are two areas where we cannot afford a mistake that the consumer sees. And how do we handle that is another story. But I would think preparation of governance, compliance, protocols, and then that we have all that in place, then I think we should go out and scale. That preparedness is not just about team and factory and everything else, but our governance and compliance. How many times we have seen FDA inspection and some factory is put on a watch for some protocol that is not being followed strictly. So I would think governance and compliance is something we must take extraordinarily seriously and be confident that it will meet our ability to scale.
I mean, this is something I just wanted, if you could spend a few more minutes on just re-emphasizing, Mr. Ramraj, on the how important governance is, not just for catalyzing, scaling up and all that, but in general, because this is something that we've seen as incubation, in the ecosystem itself, how startups tend to kind of neglect or something to be postponed for future because, well, we are too early, too involved in our product development, and we'll take care of that when something goes wrong kind of attitude.
See, we don't read the manual when we get a product. Most people will read the manual before they open up the product to see what are all the parts and how do we assemble them together. We are the least ones to read that manual. We'll find it. This attitude of what we fashionably call jugaad is great when you are in college, maybe, but not so great when we are building something that is institutional. It is great when you want to innovate, you want to try something, you want to adapt. But one of the foundations for scaling up is that you have solid systems, process, compliance, governance. Most of us think that by ignoring it, it'll catch up later. I'll put money later and catch up. That doesn't work if overall the DNA is we'll see later. That's when we have problems of scale. When we want to grow, we'll suddenly find our systems cannot cope. It is not just making a product, but the rest of the system. I've been keeping all accounts on an Excel sheet, not on a tally even. And now trying to see and get, now somebody wants to put some money, they want to talk to us, and they say, oh boy, this is not something I want to be associated with, because there is the same application of mind that has gone into development of product needs to go into development of process for compliance. I'll give you a simple example of how it translated into money for Infosys. When the IT industry started, there were certain requirements. Most customers were multinationals. There was a certain set of compliance requirements that were there under the Indian accounting rules. Infosys balance sheet and their book that they published, their annual report, would be 3 to 4 times the size of any other IT company comparable. Because they give so much more information to their multinational customers. Gave them comfort that this is a company that is so transparent that we can trust. And that comfort is what got Infosys a greater market value than some of the companies that were greater than it in revenue. So it translates into real money. And we should not ignore it when we are starting. It's a difference between a fundraise and no money. It's a difference between an incremental or an exponential market cap compared to your competition. It is an indication of whether you can be trusted or not. So early days, they must start from day one.
Day one, absolutely. I think I see another question in the message box. What kind of things we should focus while forming agreement with collaborators? This is from Suganti.
Okay. See, first of all, I think what is the expectation that you have by this partnership? What will each party do? The business outcomes of this relationship has to be drafted. The legalese a lawyer can do. Where we all make a mistake is that we hand over to the lawyer for the business part. Clarity in expectation of roles and outcomes of any relationship, the business outcomes, is the responsibility of the entrepreneur, of the CEO, whoever is at the negotiating table for this. Once the business rules are clear, business expectations are clear, then the lawyers can step up and put that into a framework of managing that in case something goes wrong. But that responsibility cannot be abdicated to lawyers. And therefore, put down, why are you doing this? What do you expect? What does the other person get out of it? What do I get? What does she get? And then see how you can put that down into expectation, roles, responsibilities, or in that contract. Then give it to the lawyer.
I hope that answers your question, Suganti.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Answered. Thanks for the elaborate answer.
Great.
Pleasure. Welcome.
Great. We had received a question from one of our student teams, in fact, in IIT, who is currently part of our pre-incubator, Nirman. So his question was, for a young startup like ours with limited traction client, how do we know in which direction to focus or grow? I think this is even prior to even thinking about scaling up.
Yeah. So in a protected environment of an IIT or any academic institution or any incubator for that matter, early days, when you haven't taken the first step of a career choice, many people are weighing between being an entrepreneur and a job that they may have, a paycheck that comes in. Haven't reached that assessment of risk yet. I would think that find out where is the value that customer is, that you think the customer will see. Is there a value? I'm not going to pay for something that I don't see value just because it came from IIT or from you, the student. So, and that, if you have 2-3 ideas, just test it amongst your friends in IIT. A simple example, we have in Chennai, the Food King. He was a student at IIM Ahmedabad. And like all students, students study at night. And at midnight, he found there was no snack. The canteen had closed. And he suddenly said, why don't I create a midnight snack business to the students? And that's how his Food King or his first food business started. Now, that may be one way to test your idea. If that didn't work, maybe it worked in that environment, whether it would work elsewhere, but you have the opportunity to test. If you think it's not adding value, drop it and try something else. The big advantage is test quickly and move on. If you think there is a big if about it, drop it. Most of us cling on too long, and that causes problems. So the beauty is experiment, try, test. Works, put your heart and soul behind it. Doesn't work, drop it, try something else. So experiment as much as you can, validate, and then put your heart and soul behind it. Drop things that are iffy.
Drop things, yeah. This was a question from Jeetu Lalwani from Bangalore, NSRCEL, who had asked how to manage scaling up when you're growing aggressively and how to raise funds. And I think many people have asked questions, at least the ones we gathered earlier, on funding. How do you raise substantial money to plan, prepare yourself for scaling up? Or while you're growing quite rapidly, what if you run out of funds? What happens at that point?
That is part of planning.
Yeah.
Funding is not a parallel track in planning. It's intrinsic to your planning process. As much as your production, go to market, and all of that, funding has to be core if you are looking at scaling and growing very rapidly. Many a time we look at companies that are growing 20, 30, 40% month on month. They raise money maybe every 9 months, every 12 months. Raising money takes a lot of time of the entrepreneur. People want to talk to the entrepreneur. So part of that planning is, if I, the entrepreneur, am going to be spending a significant portion of my time raising money, who's going to run the company? And if I'm going to do both, I'm going to fail in both, in all likelihood. Therefore, part of that planning is to have somebody, so whether co-founder, whether an operations head, but somebody to keep that business running. If you, the CEO or the founder, is much better equipped to run that business and see the growth happening, then you need somebody else to help raise the capital. And you be available for short meetings. But ideally, fundraising is done by the entrepreneur, and then the company needs to be run by somebody else with your oversight, no doubt. But trying to do both can often be challenging. And that is part of that planning and preparation. And if you're really growing that fast, then I'm assuming you can afford to have a co-founder. And cash is not necessarily the only thing. You can give stocks and find interesting ways to recruit somebody who will keep that business running as you look for money.
I hope that answers some of their questions on funding.
I'm happy to answer any specific question, because if there is. But
yeah, I mean, I think from the participants today, if you have anything very specific to fundraising related, because there were a lot of questions we had received earlier as well, very similar to fundraising. What are the, I mean, things like Mr. Ramaraj, I mean, what channels to look for, when to start planning, how early do we plan? And also the fact that when you are in the midst of everything, there
Yep.
are unplanned expenses that come up. How do you meet that? You know, those are kind of things. You know.
See, we've always said bootstrap. Bootstrap is only because we are saying with bootstrapping, you will have enough proof to be able to say customers are willing to pay for my product or service. Second is, I have a great opportunity here. The market is large enough for me to be able to raise capital and gain a significant market share. If you raise external capital, they're all expecting that the business will be of a certain size, that you will be able to give a multiple of the money that you have taken, which means you need to have a large enough opportunity. So proof that there is customers willing to pay and there are lots of customers willing to pay is the starting point for you to actually go out and ask. Till then you bootstrap. There are, luckily IIT Madras has enough access to people who give you that seed money and grants, seed money, to be able to get to that proof of concept and some go to market. Then right from the beginning, you need to explore multiple ways to raise money. And a lot of it is networking. How do I get inward interest into my company? Which means you need to be visible. You need to be covered by your story is one example. You need to be written up about. Even in social media, it's good enough. Somebody in LinkedIn talks about you. Ideally, you should get inward interest to your idea, to your company. You go and ask for money, you may raise it. Somebody comes to you and says, what is this idea I read about? I would like to explore to fund. Then you're on a different footing. The smart ones are able to get inward interest. So if scaling is what you want, you're aspiring to build a nice, largish business, gain great market share, and you want to do it quickly, you have to raise capital. If you're raising capital, that's a serious part of time and effort of yours. Planning and preparing. Who will I go to? Why should they give me money? How do I get interest? How do I connect to somebody? If it is Sequoia, who do I get so that right from early days, I have somebody from Sequoia? It need not be Sequoia. It could be a Sequoia portfolio company. I'm using Sequoia because I used to work there as an advisor. So I'm using that as an example. But if I don't have direct access to somebody in Sequoia, look at their portfolio. They have a few hundred companies. Is there somebody there you can talk to find out? Any successful entrepreneur is happy to help startups and spend a few minutes sharing some of the challenges, some of the things they did right, some of the things they did wrong. The challenge is we need to pick up the phone and reach and speak. And LinkedIn is a great way to connect to some of these people. So connect, make the effort, find out and create that inward interest. That entrepreneur speaking to a partner at one of the VCs may say, hey, I was speaking to this startup, looks interesting. You get inward interest. How do you create inward interest is what you need to think about. Fortunately, there are a number of angel investors now, networks. How do you get access to some of them to show interest and become champions to take you to these platforms? So principle is try and create inward interest. There is early stage money available to you from Chennai Angels, Mumbai Angels, Indian Angel Network. So many there are today. Very fortunate that capital is available. Many of you are not known to people who have the money. So just get in front. Let them come knocking on your door as much as you're seeking them out. Go to angels first.
I think a raise of hand from Padmanabh.
I am Anantapatmanabhan from 10X Health Technology.
Yes, go ahead.
Sir, I have a question. The question is about the value proposition for a product or a service. Particularly in healthcare, when you produce a product or a software, there are 5 different kinds of value propositions. One is cost reduction, maybe revenue optimization, operational efficiency, maybe caregiver safety, patient safety, and compliance to standards. So what is the priority in this list when you want to develop a product or a service? Among the 5 value propositions, which you should keep it on top? What will the customer look for will you look for compliance to standards, or will you look for cost reduction or revenue? Which is the first value proposition we should look for to be successful?
Starts with your own core competence, your own interest. There are, I know, at 5 startups who are in those 5 areas that you mentioned. There is a company in Chennai that works only on compliance. They have gone to get, what is it called? NABH accreditation. The
NABH.
accreditation for NABH. They have created a tool by which it makes it very easy for you to start complying and building up the accreditation data. And they have a few thousand hospitals today, but only that. Why not then into cost reduction? Why not into that? Because quality was the focus and domain expertise that the entrepreneur had. That was an area of interest, that was an area of expertise, and therefore focused on that and is happy with the size of that opportunity. Now, whether that can be used for something similar elsewhere or not depends on entrepreneur's aspiration. But that entrepreneur has built out just compliance and accreditation as one fantastic opportunity, has raised capital, is now called as the authority in accreditation. There is association, AHPI, Association of Healthcare Providers. They call him as the expert to go out and speak about what is the advantage, benefits to them, and how even cost is reduced if you have great compliance. Many things. So domain, your own interest and passion, and then the size of the opportunity. Last one is how quickly can you convert? There was NABH accreditation became almost mandatory. Therefore, there was pressure for many of them to close. Otherwise, an enterprise sale, whether company or hospital, can take forever, however great the idea is. By the time you prove, you have references, all of that, it can take a long, long time. So here, what is the pressure to pick up your product or service? And that was therefore again opportunistic. The number of opportunistic ideas that came up during this pandemic in healthcare and related products and services it's not determined by anything other than opportunistic. Somewhere I have the skill sets in something adjacent. Let me shift it to pandemic opportunities. So multiple ways in which you evaluate, but key is that an area of interest? Is there enough opportunity? And one thing, like I said, is the sales cycle short enough? Where can I get a quicker order? Because you need references for larger guys to buy. So how quickly can I get those references? So where do I go after? So think of creating those low-hanging customers as you think of opportunities. I have relationships in these places. I can get proof. Yeah? Is that okay, Mr. Ananthapadmanabhan? I can't. I think
I think it should be okay.
All right.
We also have another question. We had another question on the front of hiring, Mr. Ramraj.
Yep.
The question is bench strength versus hiring as per need. How do we optimize that? And a follow-on to that is what are the soft skills to be built in an organization to manage transition of staff numbers as you're scaling, say from 10 to hundreds to thousands?
See, many of us look forward to to working. As entrepreneurs, we have, let us say, we are not put off by a Monday morning. It doesn't matter what day of the week it is, what time the phone rings. We are there. It's a customer call. It's any problem. It's an opportunity. We are available 24/7. In the early days, you need more and more people who have a similar attitude. So, attitude is the first thing that you have to look for and test. As much as skills are important, if you get the most skillful person who has a 9 to 5 attitude in a startup, it doesn't help you at all. It'll completely spoil the culture of that whole company. Then everybody else is going to turn around and say, what the hell am I slogging like this for? So the attitude, we don't focus as much. Therefore, there are simple ways to check attitudes, examples of where initiative has been taken. It could be in school, it could be at home, it could be anything. Test for examples of initiative. I could be great at doing things if I'm told, which means you need somebody as a boss to be supervising and saying, okay, come first thing in the morning, let me tell you what you're going to do today. That may not be always possible. It may be necessary that I define a week's outcome and then let you be to create the initiative to go get it done. But ideally, you check for attitude of people who have the initiative, who have the energy, who have the stamina to work as hard, almost as hard as you. Make it interesting. One of the things is that person is not behaving the way I do. You're not looking for a clone. You're looking for complementary strength. What I can't do well, I would like somebody else to do for me. Therefore, there will be differences in the style of functioning. What you don't want spoiled is the core values of the company. Values, non-negotiable. Styles, it's okay. I'm very different from you. We'll have different styles as long as they're not dysfunctional. So look and give. All of us are entrepreneurs because part of it is that we enjoy that freedom that we have. A little bit of elbow room we have. The idea of experimenting, of innovating. We jump with both feet onto somebody who makes a mistake. And with that, we kill all innovation, all initiative, all experimenting. How we handle mistakes creates a culture of entrepreneurship, innovation, experimentation, and ownership. Because then I'll wait for you to tell me, sir, I'm very careful and not make mistakes. Whereas I know it doesn't matter. I'll try. If I make a mistake, okay, I own up and figure out how to minimize the cost and move on and make up for it. So I would think in hiring, attitude. Second is, if you find the right kind of talent, like the best tech person, the best operations person, find the money to hire. It could be slightly ahead. You don't need to hire 100 people. I'm talking of that 1 or 2 key people. Let's say we have a requirement for somebody who's really good at enterprise sales. And you're almost there. Get that person on board if you find the ideal person. Get on board. Be very opportunistic when you are always eyes and ears out. A lot of people I hired in my early days were people who came to sell to me. As I am sitting there, somebody would come saying, how about light fixtures for your office? How about the printer or the computer for your office? And I would see how they went about and said, okay, maybe this person can go sell on my behalf. And that's a great way to find. And so we have to be constantly, as we keep looking for opportunities, we need to be constantly looking for talent. Those who are there for doing routine work, that you can hire at short notice and train. Those who are doing specialized work, I think you need to be opportunistic. It's an investment, and therefore you may not take salary, but you may find that you may pay somebody maybe a month or 2 or 3 ahead of requirement, maybe even 6 months. So senior positions, I would be, as much as you'll have a process and all that, be equally opportunistic. Plus, headhunting by yourself, looking around, is the best way to get people who you have gone hunted. As much as I said, let people come and ask you to give you money, saying, hey, I want to give money. Similarly, you go and find the right talent and bring them to come and work for you. See them at their workplaces and see how they behave and bring them to work for you. So a little bit ahead of the curve for key talent is all right.
And Mr. Ramraj, what about, I mean, this is something I have personally noticed also amongst some of our promising startups as well. When the teams were smaller, the way they worked, and then the challenge they face as they expand higher, it's quite visible. Because the first 10, 20 people, the attitude, the culture is completely different to when you have a office with an employee strength of 100, 200, 300, right? So what are the things that they should prepare for? What should be the kind of culture that they set at very early on? If you have some things, tips to give to some of our young, CEOs today who are participating as well.
What do we do when we start growing is we bring in an HR manager. We assume that one person is now going to make sure culture is okay, that our recruitment is fine, that we are the best place to work in, and we can still pay the least, and we'll have everybody smiling and coming to work. The HR person for any successful company are the bosses. It could be the team lead, it could be the supervisor, it could be the manager, it could be the entrepreneur. Entrepreneur is a fantastic HR manager in the first 10 recruits. Is there, is evaluating, is sensitive to things that are not working. How do you make sure? And now you have 100 people, you have now 2 levels, 3 levels. You're not going to be there every time to spot and be sensitive to that. Every supervisor, everybody who has somebody reporting to them, that is the training you need to give. They are not going to look at an HR manager to solve HR problems. Their team's HR has to be solved by that boss. That empowerment. How do you recognize when somebody does good work? How do you give feedback when somebody is not doing good work? How do you do it in public? How do you do it one-on-one? Rewards, recognition, you do publicly. Criticism, even in an open office, go to a corner or go for a walk and do it more discreetly. These are simple things. I've had so many. Our MMA, Madras Management Association, used to run workshops for team leads because I start as a programmer. I'm working. I curse my boss for not being sensitive. And suddenly, at the end of 12, 18 months, I am now made team lead. I have not learned. I'm not doing the same thing that my boss did to me because you think that's what I ought to be doing. I've not learned saying, hey, I didn't like it when I was treated by her this way or him this way. So there is no training when you make somebody supervisor. We assume that by seniority, by being a smart programmer, by being a smart deliverer of outcome, individually, you can manage a team. There has to be, like we do an onboarding for new employees, There has to be an onboarding for any supervisor or anybody who has people reporting, where there are things about how do you keep, and the key things is how do you recognize and how do you give feedback when things don't go well. How do you identify what should be the outcome? How do you define a problem? Most of us are very general when we talk about what needs to be done today, what needs to be done this week. How can we help somebody? And then they evolve to defining what are they doing? Why are they there in the office? How will they be measured? I need to know myself whether I've done a good job or not. I don't need to wait for you to tell me. So what is it by which I will know that I'm doing what is expected of me or more? So all that comes with some training, and we don't do that. The moment we do all this and put in the effort, then HR manager is to facilitate all this. That's what he or she will do. The responsibility for good culture is with every supervisor in that company.
Absolutely. Culture is key. I think we are pretty much close to the end time. Harshini, if you can, right? If there are any final questions from anyone, I mean, I can go on, Mr. Ramraj. It's, I mean, I personally am learning so much, as we are also at a stage of the incubation cell where we are scaling up as well.
Yep.
So this is not something that is just meant for startups alone. Even as an incubator, there's so much to learn and impart to our startups, young startups, as well as here. So any final questions? I think Rani has her hand raised second time. Quickly, very quickly,
Yes.
Rani.
Quickly, this raising, we are bootstrapped currently. We are very wary of raising funds just for the simple reason that we are worried whether our direction will be diverted by the funder, or will we be spending most of the time trying to give data for the funder, create reports for the investor, and they say no, this is, we think that there are many investors who also come in and want to give a direction to your ideas. So how do I decide
Do you take the
whether
money or not, basically?
So
I take the
first
money
of
or
all,
not?
do you need capital to grow? If you need
I mean,
capital
if I
to
want
grow,
to scale, as per your definition of scaling, if I need to scale, yes, I need capital. Because I have an idea. I may be like an MSME, growing organically. But if I want to really grow and reach the scale that I think I am possible to reach, then I know that I need to be invested by somebody. Invested in by somebody. Yeah.
so there are, so the key is growth and scale is something you want to do, not because I have defined it and made it look exciting.
No.
Okay. It has to come from within you.
Yes.
If it comes from within you, and capital is one of the key things that you need, it is something you must be careful in choosing. What happens is that somebody comes to you and says, I value your company at 10 crores. Somebody else walks in and says, and you think, hey, this person looks nice. I think won't interfere too much. I think values are aligned. I think the plans that I have shared seems to be okay. Then somebody walks in and says, hey, Rani, what are you giving this company away for 10? I'll give you at 20 crores. And you are tempted by that valuation and not by the qualities
Gotcha.
of what else comes alongside. So, as much as we choose our partners in life, similarly, because you're spending so much time with this person, can drive you equally nuts at work.
Absolutely.
So be careful in who you bring to the table. If you're comfortable with somebody whose valuation may be slightly lower, it's not that it is at any value,
Yeah.
you negotiate.
Sure.
But don't go, many a time the mistake happens because of that first little carrot that is thrown. So be careful who. Second is, I come in and talk to you, and let's say there is a rapport. But the person who's coming on the board, I send somebody else.
Sure.
It's a colleague of mine who's coming, and the chemistry is awful. And that's it. So therefore, again, be sure who, how to participate in this whole thing. So
Thank
be
you.
careful who you take money from. But
Thank
if it
you.
is
I
a
mean,
key
that is-
thing, please do it.
Yeah, I know it's very valuable. Like you said, taking the person in the board is a very important decision. Who's coming into the board this seems to be a more important decision than how much money sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank
And
you, sir.
understand,
Thank you.
understand that while you can get inputs from these people, network, why are you taking beyond the capital? Is there a network? Is there some value addition? Then look for that. If it is only capital, then there is very little else. So you don't need to, go way beyond that.
Sure.
So just be cognizant of all this as you take your capital.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Great. So I guess, Muthu, we wrap it up.
Yeah, we do. Just before we go, I just want to say, Ramraj, thank you as always. Whenever I ask, you never say no. And thank you so much. I think everybody can go on camera, take a picture with a very humble and a great man, Ramraj. You can keep it at least as a souvenir for you. And of course, my good friend Tama, thank you so much for chairing the session. You did a wonderful job. And I think this could go on for another hour or two, but of course, we're not going to do that. So thank you very much to both of you for being marvelous doing this. Can everybody go on camera, take a picture with Ramraj? An opportunity. You know, one of the earliest internet companies to go public.
Hi.
You know, founder. Proud moment for everyone to take a picture with him. I mean, unfortunately, I can get a picture with him most of the time, so the rest of us can't take a picture with him. And
Thank
so
you.
nice to see so many of you. You know, thank you so much, both of you. Really appreciate it. Sorry to hijack the session, but I had to say thank you to both of them. So back to you, Arshini. If you are there.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
Thank
Okay,
you, sir. Thank you, Dr. Tama, and thank you, Dr. Ramraj, for joining us today. And thank you, all the participants. So
Bye-bye.
I think we can call it.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.